guys, Heidi Preeb here. I tried to record this video twice already this week, which is why it's coming out so late. I usually try to get something out by like midweek, but this past weekend I went to my cottage and I got sunburnt, which usually does not happen. I very rarely burn, but I was on my dock reading the book The Midnight Library, which by the way is like NFP crack if you're looking for a fiction book, and I completely lost track of time. And the weirdest part was that my lips burnt really badly, which like I did not know could happen. I didn't know you could sunburn your lips, but yeah, they burnt and then got like super dried out, and it was so weird and painful. And also it looked super distracting on video. So I'm recording this for the third time because it's like mostly gone. I've got like still a little tiny patch of it. But hopefully third time's a charm and this works out this time and you're not distracted by my red skin. So this video is by, I'm not gonna say popular demand, like one person asked me and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll make that video. Because the other week I released a video on ENFP productivity and someone had requested if I could do the same thing for INFPs. And I figured that even though ENFPs and INFPs share the same cognitive functions, so they all use FI, NE, TE, and SI, it would be useful to look at what those cognitive functions look like when they're in a slightly different order, which is how it works in the INFP's brain. So I made this promise at the beginning of the ENFP video, and I'm going to do the same here, that this video is not going to be about trying to hyperstructure your life. It's not going to be an attempt to turn you into an ESTJ, because I think that the more you're trying to model the behaviors of a type that doesn't come naturally to you, the quicker you're going to burn yourself out. And if we're talking productivity, we have to talk about how to not burn out. And in order to not burn out as an INFP, you have to learn how to enjoy being productive, okay? Because I don't care what anyone says, that is the key to productivity for everyone. The reason that ESTJs and ENTJs are hyperproductive is because they genuinely enjoy the feeling of getting stuff done and crossing things off a to-do list and planning for the days and weeks and months and years ahead, okay? If you enjoy that, of course you're gonna do it all the time, right? But your creative process is something totally different. And in order to be productive, you have to learn how to lean into that process and how to structure your time in a way that you actually really enjoy and feel energized by, or else you're never going to get anything done. So this video is going to be about holistic productivity and how to harness your natural skills and abilities and cognitive functions as an INFP in order to help you put some structure around the things that feel really meaningful for you so that you can get them done and just produce more of whatever it is that you love in your life, because I think that that should always be the end goal. By the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say cognitive functions, I'm talking about the cast of characters that make up your brain as an INFP. So I do run a 6-week INFP Soul Bootcamp program where I introduce you to introverted feeling, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted thinking as little cartoon characters that govern the inside of your mind. And we talk about things like emotional intelligence, goal setting, creativity and career, and a whole range of other things that INFPs tend to either struggle with or just find really interesting. And the focus is to make you feel more like yourself, not less, as is the focus of this video. So in the interest of being productive with this time, let's start talking about what that looks like for INFPs. So there's this quote that I dropped somewhere in the middle of the ENFP video that I'm just gonna open with here. I don't remember where this quote comes from or who said it, unfortunately, but it's the idea that people who think they have a time management problem usually don't have a time management problem. They have an emotional management problem, okay? And that doesn't mean that you have too many emotions. It doesn't mean your emotions are too much. It just means that sometimes when we feel like we're unable to complete the goals that we want to complete or to structure our time effectively, the problem is actually that we're not dealing with our emotions effectively and we're not acknowledging them in the proper way and we're not giving them the seriousness that we need to give them in order for those emotions to kind of clear the way for us to focus on other things. So I think that what a lot of INFPs naturally do when they're trying to get themselves to like zero in and get a bunch of work done is tell themselves, okay, it's time to ignore my emotions. And that's actually the complete opposite of what I'm going to recommend that we start with when we start talking about INFPs and productivity. So we have to look at everything through the lens of how your mind is made up, right? You are a dominant introverted feeler. And what that means is that you're very naturally and deeply in tune with your subjective interpretations of the world. So what you perceive to be good or bad, just or unjust, interesting or uninteresting, you cannot turn off the part of your brain that is constantly making subjective value judgments about the world around you. And that's a wonderful thing. That's your superpower. But it also means sometimes when you sit down to work, your brain is screaming at you to emotionally process something that really isn't conducive to the work that you're trying to do. If at any point you need me, I will be here. I will also be here when you don't need me. Important work meeting, love it. Time to think about the futility of the human experience. Having a completely normal conversation with a stranger at a bus stop? Don't mind if I do interject with a fantasy about the two of you marrying off the coast of France in an off-white gown with a flute quartet serenading you from afar. Anyway, what can I say? It's just what I do best. And the first thing I'm going to encourage you to do is not to try to shut down that part of your brain, but to actually bring it to the surface and validate it. So I am an ENFP, but introverted feeling is very high up in my cognitive stacking as well. And something I like to do when I'm sitting down and trying to get down to work and I'm distracted by a lot of emotions or thoughts is just write them down on a piece of paper and then make an appointment with myself to visit those emotions properly at a time in the day that is better for me. Okay? And this seems ridiculous. It seems absolutely ludicrous to like make an appointment with yourself to think about your own feelings. But the problem is that emotions don't go away until we deal with them. Because emotions are very important messengers for our brain, right? They're how we evaluate the world around us and how we should act and behave and what we should focus our attention on. So if we just tell our emotions don't bother me, what happens? Our emotions just get louder and louder and louder because they have something valuable to say. So what can be helpful is just writing down whatever thoughts or feelings are distracting you and then looking at that list, validating it, going, yeah, this is some stuff I could really stand to sit down with, pay some attention to, find some solutions for. Between 3 o'clock and 3:20, I will come back to this emotional experience and I will think about it for a while. And then, this is very important, you have to actually do it. I don't care if by 3 o'clock you're not feeling that emotion anymore. You made an appointment with yourself. In order to build accountability with yourself, you have to show up to that appointment. If you check in with yourself at 3 and your emotions are like, oh, hey, cool, no worries, I resolved that in the meantime, we don't need to worry about it, that's cool, you can move on to the next thing. But if you tell yourself, I'm gonna check in with myself at 3, and then you don't do it, the next day if you try this exercise again, guess what? It's not gonna work because your unconscious brain goes, you never returned to this yesterday, so now I don't trust you when you tell me that we're gonna return to it later today. Okay? When you are validating your emotional experience by telling it, this is important, it's just not the right time, and then you actually make a point to show up for yourself and process and work with those emotions when it is time, you're going to start to build a sense of trust with yourself, and it will take a bit of time, but that sense of self-trust will eventually help you to quiet your mind a little bit during the times when you do really need to put something aside mentally, because you're not telling yourself what you're thinking or feeling is unimportant. You're telling yourself it is important, and I am going to deal with it, and here's when. And that allows that part of you that maybe feels a bit frantic or like there's something really imminent to calm down and go, okay, I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be dealt with, and I know exactly when. So for now, I can leave this be. And you'll find that if you practice this over and over and over again, the more you build that self-trust, the better it will work. So that's tip number 1. If you really need to put some sort of emotion or thought to the side temporarily, make an appointment for when you'll come back to that emotion or thought, and then go to the appointment and do this as many times as you need to. But ideally, you actually don't have to put your emotions aside to get good work done. So that leads us to point number 2. Instead of trying to put aside your introverted feeling in order to do work, literally learn to harness your introverted feeling in order to improve your experience with working. And the way that I recommend you do this is by pairing your work with something that already makes you feel really good. So the first part of doing this is figuring out which negative emotions you already have paired with certain work projects. So for myself, I tend to procrastinate the most and be the least productive when I feel incompetent at something. So if I sit down and look at my work and I'm like, ugh, I don't know what to write for this chapter, I don't know what to say on this video, I will go into overwhelm mode, okay? And when I'm in that mode, it's really hard to be productive. And so to counter this, I think to myself, what makes me feel competent naturally? What am I already good at? Which things do I already pretty well have down? And how can I pair one of those things with this assignment? So for example, there are a couple of meals that I know how to cook really, really well. I've had a lot of practice. SI has internalized exactly how many spices go into the recipe and when and how long to cook it for and when to check it. And so if I need to write a chapter that I'm feeling not so confident about, but I have a time crunch, I will go, okay, I'm going to make this meal that I know I'm really good at making while I'm writing this chapter. So I will season the chicken, pop it in the oven, and then give myself 20 minutes to just sit down and write as much as I can as quickly as I can. take it out of the oven, put in the carrots, sit down again, write another part of the chapter as quickly as I can. And this plays on two different things, right? It plays on my extroverted thinking a little bit because I'm giving myself time frames to work within, but it's also allowing me to step into my work with an energy of confidence present because I'm doing something that I know I do well and that I know I can do well on autopilot. And so my body is now in confidence mode. I'm feeling good and capable, which is the exact energy that I need to feel in order to do my work. And for you, maybe it's not cooking, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's doing something creative, maybe it's going for a walk through nature. It can be literally anything as long as it gets you in that mode of feeling confident, capable, or whatever else the emotional antidote might be to the emotional problem that is getting in the way of you doing your work. If your work triggers feelings of stupidity, do something that makes you feel really smart. If your work makes you feel stressed, find something that makes you feel relaxed and schedule work blocks in between practicing that thing. The idea here is just to get your physiology rewired in a way that kind of hijacks your nervous system and allows you to approach the work task with a new energy. It's like a fun symbiotic relationship forming. A lot of the time, the problem is not that you can't do something, it's just that you have forgotten the part of yourself that is capable of doing that. So you just need to give yourself a little reminder to get that person back in business, which kind of leads us to the third productivity tip for FI, which is defining yourself by the kind of person you want to be rather than the actions you take. And this is a tactic that I directly lifted from Atomic Habits, so this is not my idea. It is James Clear's idea. He is a habit formation expert, and he talks a lot in his book about how we stick with things the hardest when we believe that they are in line with our identity. And this is your superpower already as an INFP, okay? You are very in tune with who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what you're interested in, what you believe is right or wrong. How you define yourself and how you show up in the world is already what you like to think about. So we can now take that natural tendency and apply it to your work life. If you are continuously making long lists for yourself and then not getting any of them done, it's probably because that list is not aligned with the way that you think of yourself. You're trying to act as though you're someone you're not. However, you can change the way that you start to think of yourself, and then those actions become a lot easier. So there is a quote from Atomic Habits that I really like that I'm going to read to you verbatim. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. So the way that James Clear explains this is instead of thinking about what you have to get done or what items are on your to-do list, think about what kind of person do I want to be, and then your action is a vote for or against that kind of person. So do I want to be a kind of person who wakes up early? Well, if I were the kind of person who wakes up early, what would I do around 10 p.m. each night? Would I start surfing the internet, or would I start powering down to go to sleep so that I could wake up sometime around 6? And that going to bed early is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. When you wake up at 6 the next morning, that's a vote for the kind of person you want to be. When you don't drink a coffee at 5 p.m., which I am tremendously guilty of, that is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. So it's not just about what you're doing, it's about the identity that you're constructing for yourself. And what's nice about this is that it takes the pressure off each individual circumstance, right? Let's say you want to be the kind of person who is very active in their day-to-day life. You don't have to have a great workout every time. You don't have to eat perfectly. You don't have to run the fastest every time you go for a jog. All you have to do is show up again and again and again and keep making tiny votes for the kind of person you want to be. And those votes eventually accumulate into an identity. And once you identify with the actions that you take, you are much, much more likely to continue to take them because we get very attached to our identities, especially when you have FI as your dominant function. So this is more of a long-term strategy, but when you're looking at setting longer-term goals, worry less about, am I doing the hardest workout every day? Am I showing up at the absolute top of my game every time at work? Am I getting to bed earlier and earlier every night? We don't have to do everything 100% in order to be moving in the direction of being the kind of person who does this kind of thing. A person who is usually active could probably skip a week of activity and then get right back into it the next week. A person who generally wakes up early probably sleeps in every once in a while, but they don't let that deter them from getting back into their normal wake up early habit as soon as they feel well rested again. If we were the kind of person who did these things, we wouldn't have to do them every single day all of the time. We would just have to do them more often than not. And that takes a lot of pressure off of our long-term goals. It becomes progress, not perfection. Okay. Extroverted intuition is your second cognitive function, and this is the part of your brain that really likes to cross-contextualize information. Hey guys, what are we doing in here?
FI said that it would be fun if we stayed up all night researching polyvagal theory. And I mean, you know I don't think of time in a linear sense, so I was in.
So NE likes to cast a very wide net intellectually. It likes to research a lot of different theories, understand things from multiple different angles, and then it likes to cross-reference all of those ideas, figure out which one of these things is not like the others and in which way, and what is this beautiful kind of pearl of wisdom that pulls it all together. And in order to self-actualize in any form as an INFP, you have to accept that that is how your brain works. You do not have that same laser focus that other types might have because your intellectual mind is kind of more like a playground for you, and that's a wonderful thing. Work with that, okay? So I was thinking about this when I was babysitting my nieces. I have 3 nieces who are all under 10 years old, and if you want anyone between the ages of like 1 and 10 to do absolutely anything, you have to make them think that it was their idea. And because your brain as an NP type is kind of like a child on a playground, you have to treat it the same way. So if you tell your extroverted intuition, focus on one thing, it absolutely will not focus on that one thing. It will focus on that one thing and also 10 other things that that thing reminds it of. Okay, cool, let's work with that. Like a child, you have to give your extroverted intuition options, okay? Let it feel like it has chosen what to focus on. So for NP types, I actually really highly recommend always having multiple projects on the go deliberately. To an extent, your brain just needs to jump around. That's how it works best. So if you have an option of 3 different things you could work on, it makes your brain feel like it has some breathing room, okay? If you sit down at your desk in the morning and you go, I have to do this one thing, what happens if you tell a 4-year-old that? No! Even if that's what they wanted to do. They don't want to do it because now they have to. You can treat your brain the same way. Tell it, you get to pick what we do this morning. Here are 3 things I need to get done. Where do you want to start? And I really encourage you to listen to your natural energy here. If you start on one task and it's really, really draining your energy and you're really not getting where you want to get to with it, allow yourself to switch focus. Try task B. And I recommend that you don't pick, let's say, 3 tasks that you have to get done for work. Let one of them be a personal project or a passion project, and let yourself take breaks and focus on that for a little bit if that's what you need to put yourself back in the zone. Giving yourself permission to work on the thing that you're not supposed to be working on makes your brain feel kind of like rebellious and excited, and that puts you in creative energy a lot of the time, right? So if you let yourself rebel a little bit, do some of that work you're not supposed to be doing, and then come back to the work that you are supposed to be doing, you're probably going to come back into it with a lot more energy than you originally had. So treat your extroverted intuition like a child in a playground, give it lots of room to explore, give it lots of different options for what it could focus on, and then let it take the reins, because when you let it do that playing and exploring and experimenting, it comes up with absolutely brilliant results. You just have to let it run its natural course with a little bit of parental structure in place. Next metaphor for extroverted intuition, because this is also the part of your brain that is a metaphor junkie, is going to be treating your extroverted intuition like a cake that you are baking, okay? I made banana bread this morning, and the way that you make banana bread, like the way that you make any loaf of bread, is you put a whole bunch of different things together, and then you mix them all together, and then you put it in an oven, and some scientific stuff that I don't understand happens, and then you take it out, and it is in a different and more digestible form. And this is also the way that you are going to produce your best ideas as someone who uses extroverted intuition. Step 1, get all the right ingredients. So often, when NP types are feeling burnt out, it's not an output problem, it's an input problem. They are not feeding their brains a wide enough variety of information. It's like trying to make banana bread with only bananas and baking powder, okay? That's not gonna give you a loaf. You need to add more things in. So if you are feeling creatively uninspired, maybe you are not feeding your brain enough new ideas and theories and concepts. Give yourself time and space to fill your mind up with new experiences, new theories, new thoughts, new emotions. Talk to different people, walk through different parts of your city, pick up a book on a topic that you would normally never pick up. Feed your brain a wide variety of things, and then you're gonna pick which of those things are going to be the ingredients for whatever it is that you're trying to work on, and you're going to put those things in an oven. So here's how this works. Extroverted intuition does not go from brain to paper, or from brain to computer, or from brain to meeting, okay? Extroverted intuition needs to work with introverted sensing in order to figure out what the best synthesis of ideas is. So you need to give your brain lots of stimulation, lots of different things to think about, and then you need to find some sort of practice for how you're going to bring those ideas together and produce something as a result of them. So I can't remember if this one is from Atomic Habits or Deep Work, but one of those two books recommends figuring out what problem it is you're trying to solve. So let's say there's something at work that you need to come up with a solution to. Ask yourself the question very intentionally. Spend a bit of time brainstorming which things are related to that thing and what concepts you need to keep at the forefront of your brain in order to solve it. And then go for a really long walk and just let your mind passively focus on it. So try to keep your attention in the arena of this problem that you're trying to solve and continuously guide your attention back to how could all of these different things come together to form the solution. But ponder this while you're doing something else. Something very calming that you can do on autopilot. Go for a walk, go for a drive, do some meditation, and then sit silently with the problem. This is your version of putting those ingredients for problem solving into the oven and giving them time to bake. And you might find that the more you practice this, the more you learn about how to improve that recipe, right? So maybe you're out on a walk thinking about this and realizing, hey, I'm actually missing a bit of information. I should have read this book before I tried to solve this problem. Or maybe you're driving through your city thinking about how you're going to solve this problem and realizing I actually need to give these ideas a little bit more time to marinate. Just like pulling something out of the oven and checking to see if it's done. You're going to learn as you practice it how to optimize this process and how much time you need for various parts of it. But the important part is giving yourself those ingredients and then finding a practice that puts a little bit of pressure on those ideas so that they bake themselves into something that looks more like a finished product. And a lot of the time that pressure is just the pressure of an impending deadline, right? So if something's due at 4 p.m. and you put it in the oven at 10, might not have time to cool before the deadline, right? So you learn, okay, the next time I need to put it in the oven the day before. I need to go do that process of active problem solving a little bit before this project is due. But it's all about having a process, because if we don't have one, we're just eating different parts of the batter, and that's delicious, but not always the most productive. So, introverted sensing. So we've been don't wanna-ing when it comes to our work for a couple weeks now. Have you guys noticed that?
Yeah, I spend like 2 hours a day looking up different careers on the internet, which is the exact same thing as applying for jobs.
Okay, we'll circle back to that when we're in a better headspace, but for now, how about this? I'll go put some towels in the dryer so that they're nice and fluffy for when the INFP comes out of the shower. And then I'll help her prepare a healthy smoothie, put on some clean clothes, and then we'll find an excuse to leave work midday and nap, but this is the last time.
That is so nice of you. Thank you, SI.
I'm here to take care of you guys. Introverted sensing is the part of your brain that checks in with your body and your environment, that keeps you aware of how you're physically responding to the things in your environment, and that helps you form reliable routines to navigate the sensory world. So in 2018, I started studying neurolinguistic programming. And neurolinguistic programming puts a huge emphasis on figuring out what is triggering us in our environment. And when I say the word trigger here, I don't mean it like in the sense of trauma work, where something really dramatically dysregulates your system, okay? I'm talking about really, really small scale triggers. For example, opening up your computer and seeing 16 tabs could instantly trigger some sort of thought that happens so quickly and so unconsciously that you have no idea it ever passed through your mind. But that thought may have been a judgment about your ability to keep yourself organized and on task. And as soon as you've made that judgment, your body is already responding to it, right? Maybe you're feeling dejected and full of shame, and that shame makes you want to go seek comfort. So now you're getting distracted and you're thinking about what you're going to do for comfort. And this little tiny thing, this tiny visual trigger in your environment completely changed your physiological state and pulled your focus somewhere where you never intended it to go. And I did not believe that tiny environmental things made that much of a difference until I started using NLP practices to work with my own mind and realized, oh my God, these things make a really big difference. So this one might actually be kind of fun for you because introverted sensing is your tertiary function as an INFP, and you kind of enjoy using it and flexing it a little bit. And this is your opportunity for you to get really, really well acquainted with what your environmental triggers are. So your triggers can be anything you see, hear, feel, touch, or taste. So any parts of the world that you take in through your 5 senses can trigger a physiological and mental response in you. And if you want to be more productive, you have to figure out what triggers you into an unproductive thought pattern and what triggers you into a productive thought pattern. And then you can optimize your literal physical environment so that you're being triggered more in the direction of productivity than you are in the direction of distraction. So the way that you do this is you first figure out the path to productivity. So all the things that happen between you waking up in the morning and you beginning to do whatever kind of work it is that you're trying to do. And you physically, not in your mind, do this literally with your body in reality, move through that process. So if you're someone who gets up and commutes to work, literally start in your bed. I purposely filmed this in my bedroom because this is where my productivity starts, right at the beginning of the day. And figure out, when I wake up in the morning, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I feel? Notice all of these things and also notice what response you have to each of them. So for example, I wake up in the mornings and if my room is messy, automatically I have a physiological response to that and I feel scattered, disordered, things are out of place. I'm thinking about, okay, I need to put this here and oh, I can't believe I left that out. I'm already, within seconds of waking up, feeling distracted, judgmental towards myself. There's a feeling of stress in my body. And all of these things are already pulling my focus away from what I want to do that day. So if I want to eliminate this trigger, I have to make sure that before I go to bed each night, my room is in relatively good order. And if it isn't, I have to at the least make an appointment with myself so I know exactly when I'm going to clean my room so that I don't get distracted by thoughts of it first thing in the morning. And then again, I actually have to show up to that appointment or else this whole thing doesn't work. So maybe every day you get out of your house, you get into your car and you commute to work. And maybe you usually listen to the radio and sometimes a song comes on that triggers some old memory that puts you into an emotional flashback and gets your entire body reacting to an emotional experience you're having that you didn't plan or expect to have. And maybe by the time you show up to work, your mood and your entire physiological state is actually just a response to whatever music you listen to on the way over. But what if you could mediate that? What if you could make a certain playlist or plan to listen to an audiobook that you knew was going to keep you fairly regulated and fairly focused? You would be eliminating an unpredictable environmental trigger. Now, as soon as you sit down at your desk, what are you seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and touching? Some of these things are going to be within your control, and some of them are going to be out of your control. But step one is just developing a really deep awareness of which things in your environment make you feel which way. So I don't know if any of you have read Marie Kondo's books. I actually haven't, but I have heard rumor that she might be an INFP. I have no idea if that's true, but I do think that her philosophy is actually very, very INFP, looking at what sparks joy, right? There's something very real to that. It is using introverted sensing to tune into your body's sensations in response to your environmental stimuli, and then checking in on how is this being processed in my introverted feeling. And that's kind of what you need to do in order to figure out which environmental cues are sparking productivity and which ones are sparking distraction. So I know for myself, without a shadow of a doubt, that if I wake up in the morning and check my phone right away, instantly my productivity is going out the window. Do I still do it most mornings? Yeah. But if I want to be hyper productive one day, I know that not checking my phone when I wake up is a really good way to get myself in the zone because I can bypass a distraction trigger. So if I have a day where it's super important that I don't get distracted, I have to make sure my house is clean before I go to sleep. I wake up in an uncluttered space, I don't check my phone, I don't even turn on my internet in the best case scenario. I just sit down at my desk right away and begin writing. And a kind of fun experiment to play is to try to reverse this process and think to yourself, if I wanted to be as distracted as humanly possible, what would I do? And figure out every single thing in your environment that you could do to take your focus away from your work. So I would wake up and I would have a super messy room and I would not have figured out what I was going to wear that morning. So I would try on 25 different outfits and then I would sit down at my computer and open up a whole bunch of different internet tabs and I would look at Airbnbs in foreign countries for a while and then I would find the book that I'd left half open on my desk from the night before and I would start reading a new chapter of the book and then I would answer some text messages from people and then I would probably turn on a playlist and get distracted by some feelings I'd left unprocessed and then I would obsess over what I was going to eat for lunch for a little while. And by this point, I would have successfully wasted most of the morning. And all of those things are tiny environmental triggers that I could have avoided. I could have cleaned my room, picked out what I was going to wear the night before, not put on music, not opened the tabs, already decided what I was going to have for lunch, and that would have given me my entire morning back. So taking some time to just be aware of what as many as possible of those tiny environmental triggers are for you allows you to design a routine for yourself where you are bypassing as many of the distraction triggers as possible and where you're optimizing the productivity triggers. So a morning where you wake up, don't check your phone, already have your clothes picked out, don't listen to music that derails you, open your computer and figure out that you already cleared all your tabs the night before and now the only thing that's open on your computer is the blank Word document that you need to start writing in. Okay, environmental design goes really, really far when it comes to introverted sensing, so why not flex that muscle that you enjoy flexing and work with rather than against yourself when it comes to designing your environment. Okay, the one that we are all excited for, extroverted thinking, or TE. I just made a rule that the INFP isn't allowed to shower until she works out, and then I turned the neuroticism volume up on that rule to like 200%. Works every time. Look, I'm not trying to cause any trouble. I know you guys are busy. I organized a few agenda items that I thought maybe we could go over together. I'm open to hearing them out. Great, okay. So first of all, last week, the constructive criticism that we got from the INFP's mom, look, FI, I know that it was hurtful. Yeah, but she's not wrong. We probably should be showering more than 2 to 3 times a week. Okay, it's like you didn't even hear what I said. So extroverted thinking is your inferior cognitive function as an INFP, which means it's the one that you prefer to use the least out of the 4 functions that you do prefer. So extroverted thinking is never going to look the same in you as it does in an ESTJ or ISTJ or ENTJ or INTJ or any of the other types who prefer to use it as one of their top couple of functions. But this is the cognitive function that really likes to put things in order, to make plans and schedules, to keep you on track with your goals, and to structure your time effectively. Now, as an INFP, you might feel like having overly rigid plans or structuring your time too much really impedes upon your ability to feel creative and free and happy in life. And so I do not encourage you to overly structure your time. In fact, I think that INFPs put too much pressure on themselves to do this, okay? So something that I've noticed, as with any inferior function, is that INFPs tend to overdo their extroverted thinking when they decide to start working with it. And it's not just, I'm gonna think about what I'm gonna do today, it's I'm gonna plan out the next 6 months of my life and I'm gonna have a rigid week-by-week schedule and I'm gonna have absolutely every project lined out and I am never gonna miss a deadline and I'm gonna work really consistently towards this stuff. And then the moment that that motivation wanes and introverted feeling is no longer on board, the entire plan goes out the window because the plan feels super overwhelming. So the idea here is to avoid productivity dysmorphia, okay? So avoid that fantasy where you're turning yourself into an ENTJ and suddenly being nothing but productive all of the time. That will not work for you, okay? It's like telling an intern who just started at the company that they're now the CEO. That is going to be a disaster and they're going to quit. And if you try to make extroverted thinking the CEO of your life, that is going to be a disaster and it is going to quit. So you have to train it to fulfill the duties of being an intern first. There is a certain high that you get from using extroverted thinking, right? So the reason that you sometimes like to plan and structure your life so intensely is because you get this really good feeling from doing it. But you can get that same feeling from doing very small extroverted thinking tasks. You just have to figure out what those are. You will be productive if it feels good to be. But the reason that you're often not productive is because you set too big of goals and then you don't feel the payoff of reaching them. But if you're to start setting very small, very achievable goals, then you're going to start getting that rush of dopamine from completing them, and then you're going to want to do more of that. And this is the process of beginning an upward spiral, right? So you don't even need to be focusing on, let's say, the work task that you want to get done in order to get the ball rolling here. You can wake up in the morning, walk into your kitchen and go, I'm going to put 10 things in the dishwasher. Put 10 things in and then notice how you feel looking around the kitchen and seeing it be slightly cleaner than it was 30 seconds ago. That's going to give you a little hit of that extroverted thinking dopamine rush. If you want to get started on exercise, just do 30 jumping jacks and then check in and see how you feel after. The important part is to have that moment after you complete every small task where you check in with yourself and really anchor yourself in that feeling of pride, accomplishment, and excitement about what you could do next. That is that dopamine rush that ENTJs and ESTJs live off of. You just have to make it appropriately sized for where extroverted thinking is in your stacking. Now, this doesn't mean you can't take on very big goals. It just means that for you, those goals have to be broken way down into little tiny itty bitty tasks that you complete in tiny increments, getting that little tiny hit that keeps you going every step of the way. You're training an intern, not a CEO. So again, usually when I talk to IFP types, so INFPs or ISFPs, they're down on themselves for not having big enough goals. But a lot of the time I find it's the complete opposite. They have bigger goals than anyone else. They just haven't trained themselves to get there in tiny little increments. And that's what you have to do in order for your TE to finally reach those overarching goals, right? None of them are too big for you. It's just that you need the process and you need to use your TE in the position that it's in order to eventually arrive there. And this requires you making friends with your extroverted thinking, okay? Don't think of it as this monster that is trying to suck all of the fun and creativity and joy out of your life. Think of it as the banks of a river that gives the water somewhere to flow. Your FI is always going to be that creative, energetic force in your life, but if you don't give it any boundaries to function within, it can't do what it naturally wants to do, which is get into that flow state. TE is just about structuring your environment just enough to allow your FI to get into that flow. Because if your FI is distracted by thoughts about how disorganized your life is, it's really hard to get it into that flow, right? TE is the thing that allows your FI to do more of its good work, not less. Okay, you're not supposed to be replacing your FI with TE. You're supposed to be using your TE to give a little bit of structure to the things that don't matter as much so that your FI can focus really intensely on what does matter. And sometimes that's just a matter of what you're noticing. So Eric Byrne, who spearheaded the field of transactional analysis, which if you are ever looking for some brain candy is a really fun field to explore. You have to take his work with a grain of salt because he wrote it back in like the 60s or 70s, so it's a little on the like sexist and homophobic side of things, but if you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater there, a lot of his ideas are super, super interesting about how humans interact with each other and all of the kind of subtext that's going on beneath the surface of normal day-to-day conversations. But anyway, he talks about different needs that we have as humans as different types of hunger. So we have things like recognition hunger, sexual hunger, contact hunger, but one of the hungers he talks about that I think is really cool is structure hunger. So he says that all of us want to feel like we're living a meaningful life, and in order to feel like we're living a meaningful life, we have to feel like we're using our time in the right ways. And when we don't feel like we're using our time in the right ways, we start to feel like we're wasting our life, we're wasting our time, we're wasting our emotional energy, and we get what he calls structure hunger. So just like literal hunger in our body alerts us to the fact that it's time to eat some food, structure hunger, that feeling of I'm wasting my time and my life and my emotional energy, wakes us up to that need to put some boundaries around our time so that we can let that beautiful, deep, rich sense of meaning that comes out of our introverted feeling to flourish. And I think that NPs are almost perpetually in a state of structure hunger when we don't learn to structure our time effectively, because we automatically identify that feeling as a negative thing. We just use it to make judgments about ourselves and think, ooh, I'm feeling lethargic and unaccomplished, time to beat myself up. But what that is a hunger in you. It is your mind calling you to put some loving structure around your behavior to give yourself more choices, more opportunities to do creative work that feels really, really meaningful for you because you've put all of the less important stuff on autopilot. If you can learn to tune in to your hunger for structure, recognize it when it comes up, and then feed yourself that sense of structure the same way you would feed yourself a healthy meal, you'll find that the hunger goes away, and what takes its place is this beautiful feeling of creative fullness, creative satiation. And if there is anything on earth that I wish for INFPs and ENFPs, it is not a hyper-rigid, hyper-structured lifestyle. It is a feeling of deep personal, interpersonal, and creative fulfillment. And everything you do to structure your time should always serve the eventual end goal of getting you there. Okay, I think that is all that I have for today. Also, quick reminder that I do run 6-week Soul Bootcamp virtual courses for INFP personality types. I will put the link in this description. If you want to talk more about how to optimize your cognitive functions, it is a resource that's designed to help you do exactly that. So if that interests you, you can check it out below. But also make sure that you are dropping in the comments any productivity tips that you have as an INFP that have helped you work better. Because I think the more that we can share and learn from each other, the better. So I know that on the ENFP video, we had some really helpful comments get left. I would love to see those here as well. And as always, I hope you guys are doing awesome. I love you so much. And provided I do not get another sunburn, I will see you next week.